Hey everybody, this is Lawrence. Welcome to another episode of Dirty Basement Terrain. In this episode, I'm going to continue a series in simple rock scatter terrain. As always, I think rock scatter terrain is by far the most versatile, useful piece of terrain and is quite simple and easy to make. In this episode, we're doing desert, arid wasteland rock scatter terrain. Show you how I make it. I hope you can take some pointers or tips from this. Take what you see, try and do your own. But you don't have to follow exactly how I do it. Put your own spin on it and make it yours.
Okay, as you can see, I've already gotten my chunks to rough shapes of what I want from the scrap foam I've been using. And right now I'm just shaving off the sharp corners to get a more refined look to what I want. Or basically I'm covering a little bit extra to what I want. And now I'm trying to get some texture lines, and simply by slightly inserting the blade and then twisting out a piece so it gives like a long indentation line, if that makes sense. And I'm going to continue that until I basically get to a point where I'm happy with how it looks. And here I'm just using the standard foil ball technique to add, not really to add the texture, but to smooth out the hard edges from when I was doing those texture lines. Because the next step of actually working with this stuff is going to cover up all the texture from the foil ball. And here I'm just inserting some barbecue skewers for some convenient handles and a way to help dry this next coming step. It'll make sense once you see it, but like I said, this is just for convenience. And now I'm getting out my homemade texture paste and grabbing one of the pieces and wetting a brush. And I am going to be basically brushing on the texture paste all over this piece of rock. Like I said, this is a homemade texture paste, nothing fancy. I mean, if you would want to use one of your commercially available texture paste, go right ahead, but this is terrain. I don't really think you need to use something that costly, and my homemade texture paste is a cheap alternative to that, and for what I use it, it works perfectly. Now that I've got it completely covered with texture paste, I'm grabbing a really old beat up brush. I'm getting wet and I'm lightly dragging it across the entire thing to add texture lines to kind of look like it's been worn away by wind and weather. It kind of like rock layers. Not hard to see right now, but once it dries and it's painted up, it will become very obvious. And of course, I'm inserting the dowel into the other board of foam so it has a nice place to dry. And here I want to be adding some streaks of color to my rocks. I'm using apple barrels burnt Umber, Apple Barrels, Ripe Tomato, and Deco Arts Workwood Red. You can skip this step if you want to, but I just like to add the streaks of color because even though it really doesn't show up too obviously, it does add some interest to the terrain. And even though they're simple rock scatter pieces, it can look good if you want it to, with a few extra steps. But again, you can skip this if you want. And here I'm doing an overbrush with a Apple Barrels Golden Sunset. I'm going for like a 80 to 85% coverage with this. If you have noticed, I didn't do a base coat with these rocks, mainly because the homemade texture paste I put on was already at the right color I needed, so I didn't have a need to do that. So bonus for having my own homemade texture paste, because when you do that, you can color it to how you want. Though, honestly, that was a happy accident with this. It just worked out. But again, here I'm using the Golden Sunset to get my mid-tone, like a 80 to 85% coverage. And here I'm using Deco Arts, wait for it, sand color. I'm just going to be doing a light dry brush with this, and I'm going to be using, of course, a makeup brush for doing my dry brushing. One that I got at Dollar Tree. Don't buy a purpose-built dry brush for doing terrain, because they're expensive, and for what us terrain makers are using them for, it's not worth the price. Just go buy some cheap makeup brushes. I get mine at Dollar Tree. I'm sure other places have options for cheap brushes like this, so but for terrain they're perfect. But again, I'm just trying to highlight the edges, the cracks, the crevices, the lines left from my texturing with the wet brush and the texture paste. And yeah, that's basically it. I'm just trying to highlight all the edges and make it look pretty. And as you can see, here's the result of all those texture lines we did in the wet texture paste. They look pretty good right now, so if you'd want to stop here, stop. But not me. And of course, here after I do my first dry brush, I like to wash my terrain pieces. Just to deep show out the shadows and texture lines and whatnot, but this is a step I just like to do. It was looking a little bright for me, so I wanted to do like an orangish brown wash to just really make it look like it belonged out in a desert, the way some stones wind up looking. Okay, now the wash is all dry on all the pieces. I need to do the final highlight. I'm going to be using a 50-50 mix of the golden sunset color and the sand color. The sand color was just a bit too bright for me to do the final highlight. I mean, it looked fine, but for me, it just wasn't working. I wanted a bit darker, so I figured the mix of the two colors would actually work out perfectly. And so far, I'm happy with what it looks like, so I'm going to move ahead and use this. Pour a little bit onto the plate and get my trusty makeup brush from the Dollar Tree. And of course, my good old cardboard to get the excess paint off prior to dry brushing. Now, what I'm doing here is just basically doing a dry brush going from up to down. I don't want to go down to up because this is supposed to be highlighting as if the sunlight was hitting the piece, and you want to enhance the shadows, and that's basically what the goal is with this final highlight dry brush. Now I wanted to add a little dirt and a little extra to the indentations that I've made into these pieces. Make it look dirty, honestly. So I'm using a brown pigment powder. Actually, it's not pigment powder, it's soft pastel chalk that I've scraped. It, again, for terrain, soft pastel chalk that you scrape into a powder is an excellent choice to use. It gets you the effect you want. It's a lot cheaper than the commercially available pigment powders. Plus, if you buy a pack of the variety pack of the pastel chalk, you can get such a wide variety of colors, and you can custom mix your own colors. You can basically do what you want as far as color wise goes. But I'm not saying that the commercially available powders aren't any good. They're actually excellent. But for terrain, I would definitely go with the pastel chalk because, again, it's a much more economical choice for terrain. Because with terrain, they're big, giant pieces, and you'll be using a lot of powder over time. Save the pigment powders for your vehicles and your miniatures. Now, the thing with the powders is it can rub off relatively easy, so I like to activate it as said. Basically, I spray on some isopropyl alcohol, IPA, or rubbing alcohol, whatever you want to call it. Will you lose a bit of the dusty look to it? Yes, you will. But this will also keep it from rubbing off.
Hey everybody, if you made it this far, it means you watched to the end, and as always, I really do appreciate that. If you liked the video, hit the like button. If you want to see more, click subscribe. More videos are coming. If you want to leave a comment wherever the comment section is. If you want to get a hold of me directly, you can try my Discord page. There's a link to it in the About tab of my page here. If you have ideas you want to see me do in future videos, that's where you want to talk about, because I have a special spot just for that. Once again, I hope you liked the video. Take what you did and put your own spin on it. But as always, remember, when you're making your terrain, the only person you got to worry about is yourself, because it's your terrain.